Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughn Manor. And it's Wednesday today, which means it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, I'll talk about a certain comic book, or graphic novel, or comic book subject. And Steve Donoghue on his channel will talk about that same comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. It is our world's finest team up that we do once a week. And this week, we're talking about comic book collected editions and why they have become so important in the comic book industry today. They are more important now than they ever have been before. And what kinds of collected editions can you get? I'll talk about that stuff, and Steve Donoghue will give his own take on this kind of thing as well. And why have collected editions become so important? What does it say about comic books and the comic book industry today that they have become as important as they have become? So first, I will show you some comic book collected editions from my Hall of Comics. Let's mosey over to the Hall of Comics. All the comic books I have in a big bookcase in the hallway. So let's go now. Okay, we're in my Hall of Comics right now, which has a few different types of comics here. We're going to be talking about these. This is the Marvel Epic Collection. I collect the Epic Collections, obviously. And also here you can see some of the large omnibus volumes. These are some omnibus volumes from Marvel Comics. This whole shelf is it desperately needs to be reorganized because I'm just sticking stuff everywhere right now. So it's due for some reorganization. King Conan doesn't belong here. He's just hanging out here for the moment. But yeah, these are the big omnibus volumes, which can have anywhere from 700 to 1,000 pages, or even more sometimes. DC has their own line of omnibus volumes. But I mostly have Marvel, although I do have some DC in the other room. Actually, I have quite a bit of DC in the other room. Up here, you can see some more of the standard hardcover and trade paperbacks that you can get in the smaller, more standard size. But yeah, just some examples. Yeah, so that's all the comic books I have in the hallway there. I have a lot of collected editions there in the hall. That's not the only place I have them. I have them kind of all over, but that's where most of them are. And as you can see, there are a lot of different types of collected editions of comics that you can get, and they have become really important in the comic book industry now. I would think that a large percentage of all comic book sales, probably the lion's share, are from collected editions of comic books. The back catalog of comic books for Marvel and DC and even some of the other companies. Marvel and DC, of course, are still the big guns in the comic book industry, fueled in part by the popularity of the characters and the fact that they're in the movies all over the place nowadays. And that's one of the things I think that has actually fueled the interest in collected editions. Because one of the important things about collected editions is that they give you an opportunity to read all of the stories from these characters from the past, their beginnings, their origins, all of their adventures over time. Now, growing up, reading comic books, all that stuff wasn't really available. There were very few collected editions of comic books. Comic books were sold as floppy comics that would come out every week. Different comic books would come out. And that's how you read them. Every once in a while, when I was a kid, there would be a collection like Origins of Marvel Comics, for example. Or Bring on the Bad Guys from Marvel Comics, which would be a book which reprinted comic book stories. But it certainly wasn't something that was done with any regularity. Now, yeah, we have a ton of different formats, different kinds of editions that we can get. For a long time in the early 2000s, if you wanted to read past adventures of Marvel Comics, for example, you had to get these. This is the essential Marvel team up, which I still have because for some odd reason, Marvel hasn't come out with an epic collection of this. But for a long time, if you were interested in the past adventures of Spider-Man, the Hulk, or whoever else, the cheapest way you can do it was by reading one of these, an Essential Edition, which is this like phone book sized reprint of comic books, which were all in black and white. And they were cheap. You know, you can get them. What did this cost me? This was $14.99 when this came out. And it reprinted what? Marvel Team Up 1 through 24. So 24 comic books reprinted in this format. And this was volume 1, but they had a few other volumes of Marvel Team Up before the essential volumes finally folded and were replaced. So this is one of the ways you could get Marvel Comics, for example. The other way you can get Marvel Comics, if you wanted to get the fancy pants reprints, was this line of comics. These were Marvel Masterworks, and Marvel Masterworks are still being reprinted. This is the Captain America Marvel Masterworks edition, the first edition of Captain America, which reprinted a bunch of the Tales to Astonish, Tales of Suspense stories, and this is really high quality printing. The Marvel Masterworks are really nice and always have been. And so this was the fancy pants way, the expensive way of buying Marvel Comics. Past Marvel Comics, reprints. So if you wanted to learn about Marvel's history, this was how you did it for a long time. Eventually, that changed. DC Comics never really had anything comparable. Well, I guess they sort of did. They did have a line of comics that reprinted in hardcover the Golden Age stuff and a little bit of the Silver Age stuff. Hold on, I'll show you. I nearly forgot this. This is the archive editions that DC Comics had, where they reprinted some old Golden Age and Silver Age stuff. Again, this was a very expensive format, but it was printed. They're very nice printings of these comics. And this is all the old Superman stuff. This has the first, 4 issues of Superman in this. So compared to the omnibus volumes that they have today, there's not much in here. But it was a much more manageable format as far as reading. But this was never really comparable to Marvel Masterworks because they didn't make as many of these as the Marvel Masterworks. They did come out with a cheapo newsprint line of reprints to sort of match Marvel's Essential volumes where they did their Silver Age stuff. I should get one of those too. Hold on. I've returned once again with the Showcase Presents. So yeah, they had their version of the cheapo black and white comics reprint volumes, just like Marvel had. But unlike Marvel, DC has never replaced these with either omnibus volumes or really nice color volumes. And we're going to get to that in a minute. Because one thing I am going to mention is how much better Marvel does at this sort of thing than DC does, which is kind of inexplicable. But as far as Marvel was concerned, Marvel replaced their Essential line and made a less expensive version of this kind of thing, where you had a full color comic, which printed a whole lot of comics. This reprints a ton in here. This is Hawkeye Volume 1 with their Epic collections. The Epic collections are the collections that I collect the most of. I think these are wonderful. And these are interesting because when they first started doing these, which I think was back in 2014, they made the decision that they weren't going to do these series in chronological order. So they have a series for Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, all of their major comics. But for the most part, they decided they were going to skip around in publishing them. Like the first Iron Man published was volume 10, I believe. And that way, they weren't stuck in the 60s forever. If you were picking these up as they were being published, you weren't just reading a bunch of stuff from the 60s and you'll never get to the 70s or 80s or 90s. They kind of jumped around. Now they've been publishing these long enough that they have really long, unbroken runs of comic books. Like you can get over 100 issues of Spider-Man, for example, in an unbroken run if you buy the Epic collections, which is nice. They're starting to fill in all of those gaps which they had for a long time. And it's a beautiful line of really nice comics. And what the Epic collections are trying to do for Marvel is they're going to take a character and take a comic book and just print everything from that comic or sometimes even associated with that comic. So you'll find graphic novels, for example, that Marvel published back in the 80s and that have never been reprinted, but will be reprinted in the Epic collection, along with the regular series issues of the Punisher or Spider-Man or whatever. And this one, this Hawkeye, for example, takes a character that didn't always have his own regular series and just prints a bunch of his appearances from the Avengers, Iron Man when he had his own miniseries, and of course Marvel Team Up, to give you kind of an unbroken run of Hawkeye stories to show you kind of how Hawkeye as a character developed in Marvel Comics. Now, this is important, and this is one of the reasons that this stuff has become so collectible. But before I get to that, this is just a jumbled mess, I know. Let's talk about the other format, the big one, the omnibus format. So this is a brand new omnibus of the Invaders. And this is huge. This has over 1,000 pages. With omnibus volumes, you can expect that. You can expect gigantic volumes of comics that will reprint the stories and the covers for sometimes anywhere from hundreds of pages to over 1,000 pages. And they're big, and they're heavy, and they're beautiful, they're oversized, and they are very, very collectible and expensive. This one, what is the cover price on this? It's $125, I think. Of course, I didn't pay full price. I never do. But these are expensive. And DC has their own line, which I'll talk about in a second. Other comic book companies, of course, have their own reprint programs. This is this is a Dark Horse character. This is Hellboy, one of my very favorite characters, which is published in different ways. You can get the slim trade paperbacks. This is their version of the omnibus, which is just a paperback in this case. Dark Horse doesn't do the giant omnibuses the way Marvel does or DC does. So this is their Hellboy omnibus, which just has a bunch of Hellboy stories in it. But they also do their own hardcover line, which is a really oversized volume. This is Hellboy Volume 3, and this is their library edition, which is beautiful. I mean, this is just really impressive and really great. So a lot of companies are going to give you a paperback version of comics or a deluxe hardcover version of comics. And there are different types of deluxe hardcovers that are available. But this is why this stuff is important, and this is why this stuff is popular now. Marvel and DC have had these characters that have existed all of this time. And in some cases, like with Action Comics or Detective Comics with Batman and Superman, there are over 1,000 issues that have been printed of each of those comics. I mean, these characters have been going on for decades and decades. So if you want to read some of their older stories, those original issues are going to be out of reach, usually. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can read digital comics, which is probably the least expensive way to do it. Although sometimes it's not cheap, but it's almost certainly the least expensive way to read older comics if you're just interested in reading them. Or if you want something physical, you can get them the way I've just shown them to you. And Marvel and DC have done this in different ways. The Epic collections, for example, are tremendously popular because Marvel does something smart with these. When they put these out, they were careful in the way they packaged these Epic collections. Now, these do run by volume 1, 2, 3. Like I said, they don't publish them in order, but eventually you will have a full run of Spider-Man, for example, of Epic collections. We're getting close to that now. But if you just buy one, you'll see it has its own title. This is The Avenging Archer. And if you look at the spine, that's what it says. They don't put a number on it except on the back. Marvel discovered something pretty simple when they were putting these out. And that is, if you're selling a line of trade paperbacks, very often the first and second volumes will sell pretty good, but there are diminishing returns on the volumes that come after that. Very often, volumes 3, 4, 5, and 6 are not going to sell as well. And so, in packaging these and in publishing these, Marvel kept that in mind. So, they made sure that these are welcoming no matter where you pick them up in the series. If you just look at this, you don't know this is volume 1 until you look at the back, if you're interested. But this is something that Marvel knows you can just pick up and read and pick up other volumes if you really like it. They're very welcoming that way. They don't have that number 1 or 2 that will put you off from buying it if you see it sticking there on the spine. It's there, but it's in a nice place on the back. That was clever marketing, and it worked. That's one of the reasons these have done as well as they've done, because they are very welcoming volumes. But at the same time, these are a series of books that will chronicle the entire history of a character. So if you're really interested in a particular character like Spider-Man or the Hulk or Captain America, you can go back and read the adventures, the early adventures of these characters, and see how they developed over time. Or if you're only interested in a certain time, like if you're only interested in comics from the 80s, because that's when you grew up or whatever, you can just get them from the 80s, And it's very easy to do that because intelligently, Marvel also put the dates here of when these were published. So you can say, oh, this is from 1964 all the way through 1988, because Hawkeye didn't have a heck of a lot of comics. But for a lot of these, if you're getting Thor, it might be 64 through 66 or something like that. And so you can kind of pick and choose the decade when the comic book was being printed. Because one thing you'll realize in reading these is that the comics were very different from decade to decade. That was smart marketing on Marvel's part, and DC inexplicably has never been able to figure this out, even though Marvel has their own version of this, which is selling like crazy. DC could do this. They can do something very similar. They've had some attempts, but they've never seemed to be able to get this right. And they have such a huge back catalog, which people would buy if they just printed it regularly like Marvel does. But they haven't been able to manage it, which is unfortunate. All they have to do is copy this, and they'd be fine. Unfortunately, they've had some similar issues with their omnibus volumes. Marvel is smart in making their omnibus volumes and their epic collections. For one thing, they know how many to print. They print enough to sell out. They don't have a ton of omnibus volumes hanging out in a warehouse somewhere. They print these, they sell out, they become very expensive for those who want to buy them after they've gone out of print, which they do quickly. And then Marvel can judge which ones they want to reprint, for example. If The Invaders sells like crazy, it probably won't, but they probably didn't have a huge print run of this either. If this sells out and they see a demand for it, they will do a reprinting. Not right away. They'll make you wait 3 or 4 years, but eventually they'll reprint it. And they've been tremendously successful. Marvel knows how to reprint their stuff. They understand the value of all of this, all of these stories that they have, this huge, rich history that they have for these characters. And they know how to reprint this stuff. DC's had a harder time. And they haven't helped themselves out. For example, this is the Doom Patrol. This is a Silver Age Doom Patrol omnibus, which is really cool and really nice. The cover design is a little dull, but it's nice. But when they reprinted, they went Silver Age, Bronze Age. That's how they did it on their omnibus volumes. When it came time to do their Bronze Age, they completely reformatted the cover. So if you put these two next to each other on the shelf, they look completely different. This is the kind of dopey stuff that DC Comics does. What were you thinking, DC? A lot of us who collect these things care about stuff like that. And DC has never been able to exploit all of those back issues the way Marvel has. All you have to do is copy Marvel. That's all you have to do as far as how they publish stuff. DC has so many comics going so far back that so many of us would just love to read. They said they were going to print, I think it was a Silver Age Aquaman omnibus. I would have bought that in a second. In fact, I pre-ordered it. You know what they did? They canceled it. I hate you, DC reprint program, for canceling Aquaman. So, yeah, Marvel has it all over DC when it comes to reprints. For example, if you want the Silver Age era of Superman, you might be able to find, where was it? You might be able to find this line around somewhere, but this is it. No omnibus, no color reprints of these in paperback. And they should have all of that stuff being reprinted. They should just be pumping those out, but they don't. Marvel has them beat on reprints. So if you're interested in older DC stuff, you can find it, but it's harder to find. There's less of it available. If you're interested in Marvel more than DC, you're in luck. But like I said, some of these volumes can be pretty expensive. When it comes to omnibus volumes or even epic collections, get them when they come out. Pre-order them from your local comic book shop or your local online comic book shop. Pre-order them. Get them when they come out if you think you're going to want it, because they will sell out very, very quickly. And then when you try to go back and get them, they will be very expensive on the secondary market, on eBay or however you can find them. Which is why I got the Invaders right away. They do, however, eventually reprint a lot of this stuff, but they can make you wait. If you're just interested in reading all of this stuff, we do live in the age of digital comics where you can do that for a lot less expense. Now, why have these become so popular? There are a couple different reasons. I think one of the reasons is a lot of comic book readers now are older, and we want to read all of this stuff that we read when we were younger, or some of the stuff that we missed when we were younger. That's one reason, but that's not the only reason. Another reason is that comic books have become huge and the comic book characters have become huge. So now even people who are not old, like me, a lot of comic book fans are interested in these older comics. They want to know what comic books were like before. They want to know the history of these characters. And once they start reading this stuff, they realize that a lot of this old stuff is pretty darn good, in some cases even better than the newer stuff. And so that has increased the popularity and the importance of these reprint volumes. So they have become huge, and they're a huge part of the comic book market now. And like I said, Marvel does it right, and DC still does it wrong. DC still doesn't have a Silver Age Hawkman omnibus. What's wrong with you, DC? Why don't you have a Silver Age Hawkman omnibus? I would buy it, and so would so many other people. Alas, it is not so. I've gone on quite a long time in this video talking about these collected editions, when I meant to just make a little 10 or 15 minute video introducing you to them. Oh well, I will shut up now, and I will catch you next time.